Hello, listeners, and welcome to Higher Level History. I'm Professor Carthel. This podcast is a companion to the American Yawp online textbook, and the idea is simple. Each episode, we step behind the chapter to find the stories worth telling. We're going to slow down on the moments worth slowing down on, follow the people the textbook can only mention in passing, and ask the questions that make history feel less like a subject and more like a story. Let's get into it. Chapter 4 of the American Yawp is titled British North America. You'll read about the legal construction of racial slavery in the English colonies, the religious and political turmoil that tore Britain apart in the 1640s, and the founding of several new colonies from Maryland to Pennsylvania to the Carolinas. You'll also read about violence, a lot of violence. The Pequot War, King Philip's War, Bacon's Rebellion, the Pueblo Revolt, the Yamasee War. The chapter doesn't linger on any one of these for long. It can't. There's too much ground to cover, and the Yawp is doing what a good textbook does. Mapping the terrain so you know where you are without overwhelming you with too many details. But when you read a list of conflicts that long, it's easy to walk away thinking that colonial America was just a dangerous place, that violence was background noise. What I want to do today is slow down and ask a different question. Not just what happened, but why it kept happening, and what it tells us about the kind of country that was taking shape. Here's what the textbook won't tell you directly. These conflicts were not random. They were not simply the result of dangerous times or hot-headed men making bad decisions. They were symptoms of something foundational. Colonial society was built on a basis of inequality so steep that it generated rage almost by design. Land was concentrated with the wealthy. Opportunity was promised to everyone and delivered to very few. Men who crossed an ocean for a better life found themselves landless, indebted, and politically voiceless. And when that frustration reached a breaking point, when the government failed them or ignored them or actively worked against them, they didn't write letters to their representatives. They picked up their weapons. Not because they were uniquely violent people, but because violence was the only leverage they had. That pattern did not begin with Bacon's Rebellion, and it did not end there either. It ran through American history like a fault line running beneath the surface. You can't always see it, but every so often the ground shifts and you remember it was there the whole time. We're back in Jamestown, Virginia in the summer of 1676. The air is thick with humidity and the tense anxiety of frustration. Nathaniel Bacon has arrived at the State House with an army at his back. These are not professional soldiers. These are farmers, former indentured servants, men who owned nothing and have been promised nothing. They're angry in a way that only people who feel betrayed by a system they were told to trust can understand. Bacon wants a commission. He wants the governor's official blessing to wage war against Native Americans, whom he has convinced himself and his followers are the source of every problem in Virginia. Governor William Berkeley has refused him. Berkeley is 70 years old, a royalist to his bones. He's not afraid of Nathaniel Bacon. He walks out to face him. The crowd of armed men goes quiet. Berkeley stands in front of them, and what he does next is either the bravest thing anyone does in colonial Virginia or the most reckless. He reaches up and tears open his shirt. He bares his chest to the crowd.
"Here," he says, "shoot me before God. It is a fair mark. Shoot!"
But Bacon does not shoot. He hesitates. Berkeley draws his sword and challenges him to a duel, knowing that Bacon cannot back down without looking like a coward. and cannot strike without making himself a villain. Bacon's response is to curse and bluster and threaten to slaughter the entire assembly if necessary.
God damn my blood,
He says.
I came for a commission, and a commission I will have before I go.
The Burgesses, terrified, convince Berkeley to relent. Bacon gets his commission. Virginia has its general, and the rebellion that follows will tell us something important, not just about Virginia in 1676, but about the entire country that is slowly, violently taking shape. Bacon's rebellion collapsed almost as quickly as it exploded. Bacon himself died of typhus in the autumn of 1676, and without him, the movement fell apart. Berkeley executed the rebel leadership and was eventually recalled to London in disgrace. The royal fleet arrived with over 1,000 troops and a commission to restore order. On the surface, it looked like nothing had changed. But something had changed. The planter class of Virginia had been genuinely frightened, not by Bacon specifically, but by what Bacon represented. An army of landless white men and enslaved black men had fought side by side. They had the same grievances, they had the same weapons, and for a moment, they had aimed those weapons at the same target. That could not be allowed to happen again. The Virginia legislature responded in two directions at once. They improved conditions for poor white Virginians. They restored voting rights to landless freemen. They made small concessions that took just enough pressure off the bottom of white colonial society to prevent another explosion. Yet at the same time, they accelerated the shift from indentured white labor to enslaved African labor. And they began constructing a legal and social hierarchy designed to ensure that white Virginians, no matter how poor, would never again find common cause with black Virginians. This is the racial bargain. It is not a conspiracy hatched in a back room. It is something more insidious than that. It is a practical solution to a political problem. If you can convince the man at the bottom of the white social order that he has more in common with the man at the top than with the black man beside him, then you have diffused the most dangerous alliance in colonial society. It worked for a while. But here's the question I want you to carry with you as you read this chapter and the ones that follow. The rage that produced Bacon's rebellion did not disappear. The inequality that produced it did not disappear. The bargain just redirected it. So where did it go? And what happened when the redirection stopped working? Hold on to that question for a while. We're going to need it. Before we move on, I want to take a moment and look at something happening on the other side of the continent almost at the same time, because I think it sharpens the question that we just asked. In 1680, 4 years after Bacon's rebellion, a Puebloan religious leader named Popé led an uprising against Spanish colonial authority in present-day New Mexico. The grievances were not so different from Virginia. The Spanish had been extracting labor, suppressing native religious practices, and administering a colonial system that served those in power at the expense of everyone else. Popé had been arrested and whipped for practicing what the Spanish called sorcery. When he was released, he organized. What happened next was the most successful act of indigenous resistance in North American history. Several thousand Puebloan warriors moved against Spanish settlements across the region. They killed 400 colonists and 21 Franciscan priests. They besieged Santa Fe, They drove 2,000 Spaniards out of New Mexico entirely. Popé declared that the God of the Christians was dead. The Puebloans threw themselves into rivers to wash away their Christian baptisms. They destroyed every church they could find. The Spanish were gone for 12 whole years. When they returned in 1692, they came back differently. Softer on religious enforcement, more careful about the kind of exploitation that had produced the revolt in the first place. The Pueblo Revolt did not just disrupt Spanish colonial power, it permanently changed it. Now, set that next to Bacon's rebellion. Same era, same basic ingredients. Ordinary people pushed past a breaking point, reaching for violence because nothing else had worked. But the outcomes could not be more different. Bacon's men got pardoned or executed. The planter class got richer. Poor white Virginians got a racial hierarchy as a consolation prize. Popé's warriors got 12 years of autonomy and a colonial power that never quite recovered its former confidence. Now, I am not telling you that one rebellion was right and the other was wrong. I'm asking you to notice the difference. When ordinary people resort to violence against the systems that oppress them, what determines whether it changes anything? That is not a question with a clean answer, but it is a question worth asking. And American history is going to keep asking it for a very long time. When you read through chapter 4, you're going to encounter a lot of names, dates, and conflicts. Let them wash over you the first time if you need to. But when you get to the sections on Bacon's rebellion and the legal changes that followed it, slow down and take some notes. Ask yourself, who benefited from the way things were resolved? Ask yourself who paid for that resolution. And ask whether the people at the bottom of colonial society actually got justice, or just a different story to tell themselves about why their situation was acceptable. The Yop will give you the facts. Your job is to see what lies beneath them. Chapter 4 of the American Yop is available for free at americanyop.com. Read it alongside this episode, not instead of it. I'm Professor Carthel, and this has been Higher Level History. That wraps up this episode of Higher Level History with Professor Carthel. Don't forget to check the episode description for full music and sound clip licensing information. If you have any questions or simply want to get in touch, feel free to reach out to me at prof.carthel@higherlevelhistory.com. And if you haven't already, head over to theamericanyop.com to access your free online copy of the American Yop textbook. The podcast and the textbook work best together. Higher Level History is an independent educational resource and is not affiliated with any academic institution. Until next time, I'm Professor Carthel.